The cantina was dark and smoky. Strange lights flickered on the walls. Alien voices mixed with the sound of clinking glasses and soft music. Jake Morrison sat at a corner table, waiting. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating fast. This was the biggest story of his career. A shadow fell across his table. Jake looked up and saw something that made his breath catch. The alien was huge, nearly 8 feet tall. His body was covered in a hard shell that looked like armor. Deep scars ran across the surface. 4 eyes stared down at Jake, each one a different color. 2 long arms hung at his sides, and Jake could see that the hands had too many fingers. "You are the human reporter," the alien said. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. "I am HFY." Jake nodded and pointed to the empty chair. "Please, sit down." HFY moved slowly. His shell made scraping sounds as he settled into the chair. The furniture creaked under his weight. He kept looking around the cantina, as if he expected danger. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Jake said. He placed a small recording device on the table. "Is this okay?" The alien stared at the device for a long time. "No names. No pictures. No one can know who I am. I understand. Your identity will be protected." HFY reached for a glass that was already waiting on the table. The liquid inside was green and thick. It smelled terrible. "You humans are strange," he said after taking a drink. "Most species would not want to hear about their own wars." Jake leaned forward. "We want to understand. The war ended 5 years ago, but we still don't know why the Korthani Empire suddenly stopped fighting." "Stopped fighting?" HFY made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was bitter and harsh. "We did not stop fighting. We ran away, like children running from monsters in the dark. But your empire controlled half the galaxy. You had superior weapons, more ships, better technology." "Yes, we had all of that." HFY drank again. His hands were shaking slightly. "We had everything except understanding. We did not understand what we were fighting." Jake activated his recording device. "Tell me about the beginning. When did your people first encounter humans?" HFY closed his primary eyes, but his secondary eyes kept watching the room. 3 years ago, our scouts found your solar system. Earth was just another world to us. We had conquered hundreds of planets before. The reports said humans were weak, divided. You fought each other more than any outside enemy. That was true. Our intelligence was wrong about everything else." HFY's voice became quieter. "They said humans had no real military strength, no unified government, no advanced weapons. They said it would be easy." Jake waited. He had learned that silence often made people want to fill it with words. "I was young then," HFY continued, "eager for glory. The war fleet was the largest ever assembled. 2,000 ships, the best warriors from across the empire. We were proud to be chosen for such an important mission. What was the plan? Simple, standard conquest protocol. Destroy military installations first, then demand surrender. Most species give up after losing their defenses. Those who resist are enslaved. The stubborn ones are eliminated." Jake felt a chill. "Eliminated? War is war, human. Your species is not innocent either." HFY looked directly at Jake with all 4 eyes. "But we expected this to be over quickly. Maybe a few weeks of fighting. Then we would add Earth to the Empire and move on to the next target. What went wrong?" HFY was quiet for a long time. Around them, the cantina continued its normal business. Traders argued over cargo prices. Smugglers whispered about shipping routes. No one paid attention to the human and the scarred alien in the corner. "Luna Colony," HFY finally said. "That was where everything changed. Jake knew about Luna Colony. Every human knew about it. The first major battle of the war. A small mining settlement that held out against impossible odds. Tell me about Luna Colony. It should have been nothing. A tiny outpost on your moon. Maybe 300 humans. Basic defenses. A few security guards and some old mining equipment. HFY drank again. We sent a full battle group. 5 heavy cruisers and 2,000 Marines. It was like using a hammer to crush an ant. But the ant didn't get crushed. No, it bit back. HFY's shell made clicking sounds as he shifted in his chair. I was on the command ship, watching the tactical displays. The humans had no chance. Our weapons could destroy their entire base in minutes, but something strange happened. What? They did not surrender. They did not even try to negotiate. When our commander demanded their surrender, do you know what they said? Jake shook his head. They told us to come and take it. HFY made that bitter laughing sound again. Those were their exact words. Come and take it. As if we were not holding enough firepower to turn their entire colony into dust. So you attacked. Of course we attacked. What choice did we have? The Empire was watching. Other species would hear about this. We could not show weakness by negotiating with a handful of human miners. Jake leaned closer. What happened next? We learned our first lesson about fighting humans. HFY's eyes had a distant look, as if he was seeing something far away. They do not fight the way other species fight. They do not follow the rules. What rules? Military doctrine. Tactical procedures. Basic logic. HFY finished his drink and signaled for another. When we bombarded their communications array, they should have been isolated, cut off from any outside help. Instead, they started using old radio frequencies that our jammers could not block. That doesn't sound too unusual. Wait, there is more. The aliens' new drink arrived, carried by a server who gave them both a suspicious look before walking away. When we destroyed their power grid, they should have been helpless. No lights, no computers, no life support. But they rebuilt it using parts from broken mining equipment. They made solar panels from reflective hull plating. They created batteries from industrial chemicals. Jake was taking notes on his tablet. Sounds like resourcefulness. Resourcefulness. HFY repeated the word slowly. Yes, that is one way to describe it. But it was more than that. It was as if they refused to accept. But they were beaten. How long did the siege last? 17 days. 17 days to take a mining colony that should have fallen in 17 minutes. HFY's voice was getting quieter, but there was something else in it now. Something that sounded like fear. By the end, half my unit was requesting transfers to other assignments. They did not want to fight humans anymore. Why? HFY looked at Jake with all 4 eyes again. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because humans are insane. Jake stared at the alien across the table. Insane? What do you mean? HFY picked up his new drink, but did not sip it. His 4 eyes looked in different directions, as if he was watching for threats from every angle. Your species does not. Think like other species. When faced with certain death, most beings surrender or flee. Humans do something else entirely. What do? They get creative. The way HFY said the word made it sound like a curse. Let me tell you about Commander Lisa Hayes. She was in charge of Luna Colony's defenses. Jake recognized the name. Hayes had become a hero after the war. Her tactics were still studied in military schools across human space. I've heard of her. Then you know she was not even a real soldier. She was an administrator. Someone who managed supply schedules and worker shifts. When the war started, she was the highest-ranking person left on Luna Colony. HFY finally took a drink. We thought this would make things easier. An amateur commander would make mistakes. She would panic under pressure. But she didn't? No. She did something worse. She started thinking like a human instead of like a soldier. HFY leaned forward. Do you know what her first order was when our ships appeared? Jake shook his head. She told everyone to stop following regulations. Stop doing things the proper way. Start doing whatever worked, no matter how crazy it seemed. HFY's shell clicked as he moved. She put a construction worker named Amy Foster in charge of weapons. Foster had never fired a gun in her life, but she knew how to blow things up from mining. That actually makes sense. Does it? She also put a retired teacher named Helen Brooks in charge of communications. Brooks had no military training at all, but she had taught children for 30 years. Hayes said that made her an expert at dealing with difficult situations. Jake was writing notes as fast as he could. This was information no one had heard before. What happened during the siege? Everything went wrong from the first day. HFY's voice became distant again, as if he was remembering something he would rather forget. We followed standard siege procedures. Cut off their supplies. Destroy their defenses. Wait for them to surrender when they ran out of food and water. But they didn't surrender. They should have. By the third day, our sensors showed their main water recycling plant was destroyed. Their food storage was running low. Half there. Defensive guns were offline. HFY drank again. Any rational species would have given up. What did the humans do instead? They turned their hydroponic gardens into water purifiers. They started eating things that were not even food. They fixed their broken guns using parts from mining equipment. HFY made that bitter laughing sound. But that was just the beginning. Jake waited for the alien to continue. On the 5th day, we captured one of their outer defensive posts. 3 Marines were wounded in the attack. We brought them to our medical bay for questioning. HFY paused. That was our first mistake. What happened? The wounded humans had hidden explosive charges under their bandages. When our doctors tried to treat them, they detonated the bombs, killed themselves, and took 6 of our medics with them. HFY's eyes focused on Jake. Who does that? Who turns their own wounded into weapons? Jake felt sick but kept writing. That's extreme. It gets worse. Word spread through our fleet about the suicide bombers. Our soldiers became afraid to take prisoners, afraid to help wounded enemies. But the humans were just getting started. What else did they do? They started using their dead as bait. HFY's voice was flat now, emotionless. They would leave bodies in obvious places. When our patrols came to investigate, the corpses would explode, or hidden snipers would open fire. They turned death itself into a trap. Jake stopped writing. That's horrible. War is horrible, human. But most species have rules. Lines they will not cross. Your people seem to have no lines at all. HFY finished his drink and called for another. By the 10th day, my commanding officer was talking about pulling back. Not retreating, just regrouping. The humans were making us look like fools. But you stayed. We had to. The whole empire was watching. If we could not defeat a few hundred humans on a tiny moon base, what would that say about Corthony's strength? HFY received his new drink from a nervous-looking server. So we changed tactics. Instead of a siege, we decided on a direct assault. You attacked the colony itself. 200 of our best Marines, full battle armor, heavy weapons. We punched through their outer defenses in less than an hour. HFY's voice became quieter. We thought we had won. But you hadn't. The humans had turned their entire colony into a maze of traps and ambushes. Every corridor had hidden explosives. Every room could become a kill zone. They used their knowledge of the base against us. HFY drank deeply. But the worst part was not the traps. What was the worst part? The humans themselves. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like desperate animals backed into a corner. HFY looked directly at Jake. Do you know what Sergeant Pete Walsh did when we cornered his unit in the hydroponics bay? Jake waited. He turned the life support systems into poison gas dispensers, used plant fertilizers and industrial chemicals to create toxic clouds, filled entire sections of the colony with deadly fumes. HFY's hands were shaking again. He killed more of his own people than ours, but he did not care. As long as he could hurt us too, that's terrible. Terrible and effective. We had to evacuate 3 levels of the colony. Dozens of our Marines were poisoned. Some died. Others will never fully recover. HFY's shell made scraping sounds as he shifted position. But Walsh was not finished. What else did he do? He rigged the hydroponics bay to explode. Not just the equipment, but the structural supports holding up that section of the colony. When we finally breached his position, he triggered the charges. HFY paused. The entire bay collapsed. Took half our assault force with it. Jake felt cold. Did Walsh survive? No, but he did not care about surviving. He cared about making us pay the highest price possible for every meter of ground we took. HFY's voice was barely audible now. That was when I realized we were not fighting soldiers anymore. What were you fighting? Something much more dangerous. We were fighting an entire species that had decided dying was acceptable as long as they could take us with them. HFY looked around the cantina again, as if checking for threats. After 17 days, we finally took Luna Colony. But it felt like a defeat. Why? Because we learned that humans do not give up. Ever. Even when they are dying, even when they have no hope of winning, they keep fighting. They keep trying to hurt you. HFY met Jake's eyes with all 4 of his own. Do you understand how terrifying that is? To face an enemy that will never, ever stop. Jake nodded slowly. I think I'm beginning to. Luna Colony was just the beginning. We thought it was an exception. A few crazy humans who refused to be reasonable. HFY's laugh was harsh and bitter. We were so very wrong. Jake leaned back in his chair. The cantina felt warmer now, but he still felt cold inside. What happened after Luna Colony? HFY ordered another drink, his 3rd one. Jake noticed the alien's hands were steadier now, but his eyes kept darting. Around the room, the High Command was angry. Luna Colony should have been easy. Instead, it took 17 days and cost us 300 Marines. They wanted answers. What kind of answers? They wanted to know if humans were more dangerous than our intelligence reports suggested. They ordered a full study of human military capabilities. HFY received his new drink and took a long sip. The results were confusing. How so? Humans had no unified military. Earth was divided into hundreds of separate nations. Many were at war with each other. Your weapons were primitive compared to ours. Your ships were slow and poorly armed. HFY made a clicking sound with his mandibles. By every logical measure, humans should have been easy to defeat, but they weren't. No, and that worried the High Command more than they wanted to admit. HFY looked at Jake. They decided to end the war quickly with one massive attack. The largest fleet in Corthony history would destroy your outer colonies and force Earth to surrender. Jake knew what was coming. The Battle of Proxima Station. You know of it? Every human knows of it. We lost over 50,000 people in that battle. Jake's voice was quiet, but we also won the war there. HFY nodded slowly. I was there. I saw it happen. I watched the Corthony Empire begin to die at Proxima Station. Tell me about it. Admiral Kethmer commanded our fleet. 3,000 ships, the pride of the Empire. He was confident This would be the final battle. HFY drank again. I was assigned as a battlefield coordinator. My job was to track enemy movements and predict their tactics. That must have been important work. It should have been. But humans do not follow predictable patterns. They do not use standard military doctrine. HFY's voice became bitter. Do you know what your Admiral Kate Sullivan did when she saw our fleet approaching? Jake shook his head. She split her forces, divided her ships into dozens of small groups, sent them in different directions. HFY looked confused even now, years later. It made no sense. She was already outnumbered 10-1. Why make herself weaker by spreading out? What did your admiral do? What any rational commander would do. He ordered our fleet to pursue the largest group of human ships. Standard tactics say you destroy the enemy's main force first. HFY paused. That was our first mistake. Why? Because there was no main force. Every group of human ships had a different mission. Some attacked our supply lines. Others hit our communications relays. A few targeted our medical ships. HFY's eyes focused on something far away. But the worst group was led by Captain Tony Martinez. What did Martinez do? He commanded a cargo ship that had been converted into a warship. The ugliest, most ridiculous-looking vessel I had ever seen. It was held together with metal patches and emergency welds. HFY made that bitter laughing sound. We ignored it. How could such a piece of junk threaten our battle cruisers? But it did threaten them. Martinez loaded his ship with volunteers and rammed it directly into our flagship. His crew included a former nurse named Claire Watson and a mechanic called Steve Johnson. They were not soldiers. They were just ordinary humans who decided to fight. HFY drank deeply. The collision should have killed them all instantly. Should have. The cargo ship's hull cracked open, but some of the crew survived the impact. They found themselves inside our battlecruiser with nothing but emergency suits and improvised weapons. HFY's voice became quieter. What happened next still gives me nightmares. Jake waited. They started fighting their way through our ship. Deck by deck, corridor by corridor. They used tools as weapons. They turned maintenance equipment into bombs. They fought in ways that made no sense to our Marines. What do you mean? Korthani military doctrine is based on hierarchy and order. Every soldier knows their place. Every unit has specific duties. When we fight, we follow established patterns. HFY looked directly at Jake. The humans had no patterns, no hierarchy. They just adapted to whatever situation they faced. Give me an example. Claire Watson was a nurse. She had medical training, not combat experience. But when she found our wounded Marines in the medical bay, she used her knowledge of alien anatomy against us. HFY shuddered. She knew exactly where to hit us to cause maximum pain. She turned healing knowledge into torture techniques. Jake felt sick again, but kept listening. Steve Johnson was even worse. He understood machines better than weapons. So he turned our own ship into a weapon. He rewired life support systems to pump poisonous gases into Marine quarters. He sabotaged gravity generators to trap our soldiers on the ceiling. He made our own technology fight against us. How long did this go on? Hours. A handful of humans rampaging through our most powerful warship for hours. Our Marines were paralyzed with confusion. They did not know how to fight enemies who refused to follow any rules. HFY finished his drink and signaled for another. But that was not the worst part. What was the worst part? While Martinez's crew was destroying the flagship from inside, the rest of the human fleet was doing something even more insane. HFY received his new drink with shaking hands. Admiral Sullivan had ordered her ships to attack in completely random patterns. Random? No coordination, no strategy. Each ship captain was told to do whatever they thought would cause the most damage. Zexhi's voice was filled with disbelief. It was chaos. Pure chaos. And it was terrifyingly effective. Why? Because our battle computers could not predict random actions. Our tactical systems were designed to counter organized attacks. When faced with pure chaos, they simply stopped working. Zexhi drank deeply. Imagine trying to fight an enemy who might do absolutely anything at any moment. How do you prepare for that? You can't. Exactly. And that was when I realized we were not just fighting humans. We were fighting something much more dangerous. Zexhi looked around the cantina nervously. We were fighting a species that had weaponized unpredictability itself. What happened to the battle? It became a nightmare. Our ships were scattered across the system, chasing individual human vessels that kept changing tactics every few minutes. Some humans rammed our ships. Others tried to board us. A few just flew in circles, broadcasting insults and challenges on open frequencies. Jake almost smiled despite the grim story. That sounds like something humans would do. It was maddening. Our commanders did not know whether to laugh or scream. But the humans were not finished. Zexhi's voice became very quiet. Do you know what they did at the end of the battle? Tell me. They destroyed Proxima Station itself, their own space station. Admiral Sullivan ordered it evacuated, then detonated the fusion reactors. Zexhi stared at his drink. The explosion created a debris field that crippled half our remaining fleet. She sacrificed her own base to hurt us. And that's when your people decided to retreat? Not retreat, run. Run as fast and as far as we could. Zexhi met Jake's eyes. Because we finally understood what we were fighting. Humans are not just unpredictable. You are willing to destroy yourselves if it means taking your enemies with you. What kind of species does that? Jake thought about it. A desperate one. No, a terrifying one. Zexhi's voice was barely a whisper. After Proxima Station, word spread through our empire. We were not fighting a normal enemy. We were fighting something that could not be defeated by conventional means. Something that would never surrender, never give up, never accept defeat. So the war ended. The war ended because we were too afraid to continue it. Zexhi finished his fourth drink, and that fear was justified, because what happened at Proxima Station was not the end of human innovation. It was just the beginning. Jake looked at Zexhi across the table. The alien had consumed 5 drinks and was still shaking. What do you mean it was just the beginning? Zexhi stared into his empty glass. After Proxima Station, the High Command panicked. They sent me to study human tactics. They wanted to understand how your species fought so they could develop countermeasures. Did you find answers? I found something much worse. I discovered that humans had been studying us too. Zexhi's 4 eyes all focused on Jake at once. Your military leaders had figured out our greatest weakness. Which was, we think logically. We follow patterns. We make decisions based on data and probability. Zexhi signaled for another drink. Humans realized they could use this against us. Jake was taking notes rapidly. How? They created something they called chaos theory warfare. It was developed by Colonel Rick Taylor and Major Beth Rogers. They had studied our battle records and found that we always tried to predict enemy actions. That makes sense. Most militaries do that. Yes, but humans decided to make their actions unpredictable on purpose. They would deliberately make irrational tactical decisions just to confuse us. Zexhi received his new drink and immediately took a large sip. Imagine trying to fight an enemy who might retreat when they are winning, or attack when they are outnumbered, or surrender when they are about to achieve victory. Jake felt a chill. That sounds insane. It was insane, but it worked. Our computers, could not process truly random behavior. Our commanders could not predict what humans would do next, because humans themselves did not know what they would do next. But how could they coordinate attacks without a plan? They did not coordinate. Each unit was given general objectives and told to achieve them using any methods they wanted. The result was pure chaos, but it was chaos that always seemed to work in their favor. Jake shook his head. That's impossible. You can't win wars with random tactics. You can if your enemy depends on logic, and your enemy cannot adapt to a logical behavior. HFY's voice was getting slurred from the alcohol, but his eyes remained sharp. Let me tell you about Dr. Ian Murphy. Who was he? A xenobiologist who became a military advisor. He had studied captured Korthani equipment and discovered something terrifying about our psychology. HFY leaned forward. He learned that our minds could not handle true randomness. When faced with completely unpredictable situations, our decision-making systems would literally crash. Jake stopped writing. Crash? Like a computer overloading. Our soldiers would freeze in battle, unable to choose between actions because they could not calculate the probable outcomes. HFY drank again. Murphy taught your military how to weaponize this weakness. How? They started doing things. That made no logical sense. Units would attack their own positions. Commanders would order retreats during successful advances. Soldiers would throw away their weapons and fight with improvised tools. HFY's shell clicked as he moved. Every action was designed to confuse and paralyze Korthani forces. Jake felt sick. That's psychological warfare. It was psychological destruction. Our troops began refusing orders because they could not understand what was happening. Our officers had nervous breakdowns trying to develop strategies against an enemy that had no strategy. When did this start? During the final phase of the war. The defense of New Tokyo was the first major test of human chaos tactics. HFY's voice became distant. We sent our best remaining forces to capture the city. It should have been easy. New Tokyo was defended by civilians and a few security guards. But it wasn't easy. It was a nightmare. The city administrator was a woman named Paula Green. She had no military training at all. She worked in supply management before the war started. HFY shuddered. But she turned the entire population into a weapon. How? She organized them into a resistance network that followed no logical pattern. Children delivered messages between cells. Elderly citizens served as spotters and saboteurs. Artists created propaganda that seemed to predict our tactics perfectly. Jake was fascinated despite the horror. How could artists predict military tactics? They could not. But they did not need to. They just created confusion and fear. There. Propaganda made our soldiers think humans could read their minds. Made them believe humans were always one step ahead. HFY finished his drink. The psychological effect was devastating. What kind of propaganda? Pictures of Korthani soldiers doing exactly what they were planning to do. Poems that described our battle plans in perfect detail. Songs that named our officers and their secret fears. HFY's voice was barely audible. We never figured out how they knew so much about us. Maybe they were just good at guessing. Maybe. Or maybe humans are naturally gifted at psychological warfare. Either way, the effect was the same. Our troops became paranoid and terrified. Jake leaned closer. What happened in New Tokyo? We won the battle, but lost the war. We captured the city after 3 weeks of fighting. But the cost was terrible. HFY looked around the cantina nervously. Half our soldiers were requesting transfers to other units. The other half were having psychological breakdowns. Why? Because fighting in New Tokyo was like fighting ghosts. The humans would appear, attack, and disappear. Sometimes they would surrender, then explode when we tried to take them prisoner. Other times, They would fight to the death over worthless territory and abandon strategic positions without explanation. That does sound confusing and terrifying. Our Marines never knew what to expect. They started seeing threats everywhere. They began shooting at shadows and jumping at sounds. HFY's hands were shaking again. Some went completely insane and had to be sedated. Jake put down his pen. How did the war end? It ended when the High Command realized we could not win. Not because humans were stronger than us, but because fighting them was destroying our own forces. HFY looked directly at Jake with all four eyes. Do you understand what that means? Tell me. It means humans had turned war itself into a weapon. Not just physical combat, but the psychological stress of fighting an unpredictable enemy. They were using our own minds against us. Jake felt cold. That's terrifying. Yes, and that is why we stopped fighting. Not because we were defeated in battle, but because we realized that every encounter with humans made us weaker while making them stronger. HFY signaled for another drink. Your species learns from every fight. You adapt to every situation. You become more dangerous with each defeat. So the Korthani Empire just gave up? We declared victory and withdrew. Told our people that humans were not worth conquering. That Earth was too poor and primitive to be valuable. HFY laughed bitterly. But the truth spread anyway. Word got out that humans were something new. Something that could not be defeated by conventional warfare. Jake looked around the cantina. Other aliens were staring at their table now, listening to the conversation. Is that why you're telling me this? To warn other species? No, I am telling you this because humans need to understand what they are. HFY's voice was deadly serious. You are not just another species. You are a weapon that evolution created to fight wars that cannot be won by logic. What do you mean? I mean that humans are nightmare creatures designed to survive impossible situations. You do not give up. You do not accept defeat. You adapt and overcome no matter what the cost. HFY leaned forward. That makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Dangerous how? Because you have only fought defensive wars so far. You have only used your abilities to protect yourselves. HFY's eyes were filled with fear. But what happens when humans decide to go on the offensive? What happens when your species starts hunting instead of just surviving? Jake thought about the question. I don't know. Neither do I, but I pray to my ancestors that it never happens. HFY finished his drink and stood up slowly. Because if humans ever decide to conquer other worlds, nothing in the universe will be able to stop you. Jake watched the alien walk away, disappearing into the crowd of the cantina. He sat alone for a long time, thinking about what he had heard. Finally, he activated his communication device and began transmitting his story across the galaxy.in. The shadows near the bar, a human woman named Carla Jones finished her own drink and smiled. She had recorded every word of the conversation. Her report to Earth intelligence would be very interesting indeed. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not just dangerous when defending themselves. They were dangerous because they never stopped learning how to be more dangerous. And now, thanks to HFY's confession, they knew exactly how other species saw them. The nightmare was just beginning.